Ito ang Oragon Internet Television. Maaasahan sa balanced news in public affairs, education, music and information gamit ang mga bagong teknolohiya sa pamamahayag. Maaasahan sa katotohanan, kaagapay ng mamamayan sa pagkikipag-ugnayan sa pamahalaan. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting.
Magandang umaga po mga kaibigan. Tayo po'y magkakasama na naman sa ating tapatan sa Aristocrat ngayong araw na ito. At mahalaga ang ating pag-uusapan sapagkat ito po naman ay may kinalaman sa ating bansa at sa ating kinabukasan. Alam po ninyo ay mainit ang issue tungkol sa mga nag-uumpugang bato tulad ng Estados Unidos. Hindi po yung bato sa Senado. Yung pong Estados Unidos at yung China. The United States, whether we like it or not, played an important role in the Philippines after it bought the country for $20 million from Spain through the Treaty of Paris signed December 10, 1898. The Americans established schools and taught Filipinos their values such as democracy, among other things. The Philippines seemed attractive to the Japanese during the 1940s, and when World War II took place, the Americans fought behind Filipinos, according to some historians. And this was proven by the number of casualties. So sabi nila, hindi totoo yung side-by-side. The Americans fought behind the Filipinos. Well, the Mutual Defense Treaty was signed. It will be marking its 70th anniversary this year. We have pursued an independent foreign policy in our Constitution, saying we are friends to all and enemies to none. How independent is our foreign policy? Can we not live without America, our big American brothers? One must recall there were 4,037,564 Filipinos in the United States as of December 31, 2018. And a significant amount of foreign remittances have come from the U.S., although there's a possibility that this came to be because most banks based in the U.S. are the ones used by Filipinos elsewhere when they remit money to the Philippines. Today, I recall former Chinese ambassador to Manila, Xiao Jianhua, who always said during events, whom would you trust, a cousin far away or your friendly neighbor, referring to the United States and China? Let's discuss all issues today. And we have with us former Defense Secretary at dating Senador at kasama sa Magnificent 12 at dating Radyo Patrol, original na Radyo Patrol, Senator Ollie Mercado. We're also joined by Dr. Chester Cabalza. Siya po ay Executive Fellow ng Council of Fellows and Vice President for Research and Strategic Studies at the Development Academy of the Philippines. Siya po yung nagtuturo sa UP, Diliman, dating Associate Professor and Course Director sa National Defense College of the Philippines. Pero what makes it interesting for him to be part of us today is siya po yung fellow sa National Defense University sa Beijing, sa China, at fellow ng US Department of State sa ilalim po naman ng University of Delaware. Marami pong napag-usapan na tungkol sa mga isyong ito. We're also expecting Attorney Antonio Ligon from De La Salle, Dr. Rodel Taton, the Dean of Graduate School of Law, San Sebastian College, Recoletos, Manila. And we also expect our good friend Jay Batong Bakal, the Associate Dean of the UP College of Law. So, mga kaibigan, we will start. Let's have the opening statements from our guests. Senator Ollie Mercado, your thoughts about the Mutual Defense Treaty, the Visiting Forces Agreement, and the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Mr. Senator, good morning.
Good morning, Melo. Ay, nako, mahabang diskusyon nito, pero alam natin na talagang pag on the air ka, you can only, you're only as good as your 15-second sound bite. So it's a little difficult for us to be able to discuss, but we'll try. And I'm very happy to be with this eminent panel to, to give my contribution. Ay, nako. Pagdating ng relasyon natin sa iba't ibang bansa, may mga bagay-bagay na dapat nating isinasaisip. Very, very basic things about, napaka-importante na paalalahanan natin ang sarili natin sa mga bagay-bagay na, number one, walang magproprotekta ng interest natin kundi tayo. It's very important that we take a very hard look at defining our national interests. The other thing is that apektado tayo ng geopolitics. Ang geopolitics natin, apektado ng location natin sa geography. It's all about geography. Where you are determines how you relate with your neighbors and your allies and your threats. Alam natin yan. Ikatlong bagay na dapat natin na isa-isip. Sa governance, ang pinaka-problema natin sa aking palagay ay sa pamamahala, continuity. Pagtutuloy-tuloy ng mga bagay-bagay, mga proyekto, maging domestic at saka international. Pero isa pa sa mabigat na problema natin, it appears na wala tayong nade-develop na kultura ng pamahabang pagpaplano. Strategic thinking. I think that these are very critical issues. Now, it's not to say na wala tayong kapasidad, that we're not doing things at certain times. But on the whole, pag nag-zoom out tayo, ngayon, uso ang zooming. Pero yung zoom out na sinasabi ko, yung para sa camera, na parang kinakailangan, meron kang establishing set na malawak para makita mo yung terrain. Makikita mo, kinakailangan we constantly remind ourselves with that. And in that particular context, it requires a very good understanding of history. Tayo mga Pilipino, wala tayong hilig sa history. Nangyari na yan, anong araw yun, etc. Lipas yan, panahon pa ni ganun yan. Very personal ang ating, Kaya napaka-importante, aralin natin ang ating mga binabata. The challenges that we face has to be seen in the prism of history because you cannot understand where you are now without a historical context. And that is going to be the armamentarium we're going to use to be able to plan for the future and see what is in store for us tomorrow.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Senator. Marami kaming itatanong sa iyo. I'd like to acknowledge the contribution of the Bureau Chief of Reuters Manila, si Karen Lema. Actually, suggestion niya itong topic na ito sapagkat maraming issues na medyo may konting salimuot na dapat maging maliwanag. Dr. Chester Cabalsa, you're a very fortunate man to have seen how the Chinese and how the Americans look at the Philippines. May we have your thoughts? Can you walk us through, depending dun sa inyong pag-aaral, tungkol dun sa Mutual Defense Treaty, Visiting Forces Agreement, at EDCA? Please go ahead.
Yes, good morning everyone, and thank you Sir Melo for inviting me. Ka-Orly, magandang umaga po.
Hi, good morning.
Yes sir, good morning po. It's very crucial this year, particularly for the US, the Philippines and China. Unang-una, we will see the alpha and the omega of defense treaties. Alpha because of MDT was concocted and it was signed in, of course, in 1951. Alam natin yung geopolitical context at the time. There were insecurities in the region, and basically because of the Japanese invasion. And then of course, we will celebrate, as you mentioned for earlier, that the 70th anniversary of MDT. But at the same time, during this current administration of Biden, vis-a-vis, of course, with the Duterte regime, we will also see the expiration of the EDCA come 2024. No? So, very crucial sa US itong mga treaties niya with the Philippines. And in between of that, of course, it will operationalize the VFA, which is in question lately, because they really would want to terminate, abrogate the VFA. Kasi nga, and of course, recently, they are demanding for some charges. Kaya nga, way back natatandaan natin during the time of President Cory Aquino, I'm quite sure si Ka-Orly, alam niya naman yung nangyari dito, when the MBA, the Military Bases Agreement, ended, of course, in 1991, President Cory also demanded for a treaty with a new treaty with the US, and she wanted the US to pay $1 billion for that. So hindi naman bago yung paghingi natin ng bayad para dito. But the question there, does the Philippines really need money? Of course, yes, we need money right now, particularly that we are in the COVID pandemic, plus marami tayong mga domestic issues right now. And of course, we will see these threats right now. That one more thing, effective ngayon yung Coast Guard law ng China. That's the reason why we need to really decide, rethink, and balance our security needs and of course, strategic thinking on how we will value these treaties because there are threats. So most likely, alam naman natin, inaaral din ng China yung mga batas na meron tayong kasunduan with the United States because they really would want also to have that kind of treatment with or kind of alliance with us in the future. Inaaral nila ito at kung mag-expire man ang mga military treaties natin with the United States, they would offer because they have also regional and global ambitions for the Philippines and for the world. Yun lang po muna ang aking initial statements, Sir Melo.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chester Cabalza. I have to ask Senator Ollie Mercado, you've been hailed as part of the Magnificent 12. And one of the Magnificent 12 passed away recently, si Vic San Andres Siga. Kaibigan namin at kababayan. Pero in hindsight, do you think it was the right decision? Because if I recall, then Speaker Monching Mitra even joined a rally before the Senate calling on the legislators, the senators, na wag na munang paalisin yung mga Amerikano. Was it a step in the right direction? Because some people say, nung mawala yung Amerikano, medyo lumago yung China. What's your take on this?
Well, hindi naman na-establish na in things that are happening in the world, you cannot say one thing causes the other. Yeah. Causality in social sciences is not possible. Multifactorial yan. Maraming mga bagay-bagay yan. And if you put it in context, it was the correct decision. Largely because of the fact that the political costs for both the United States and the Philippines for military bases to remain was very, very high. And we knew during that particular time there were questions about our economy, etc., and doing it for honor for us to be able to move forward. I don't think personally that the rise of China was largely affected by the removal of the bases in the Philippines. What has changed is the nature of warfare. The nature of warfare that needs permanent bases. Sa totoo lang ngayon, meron magandang paper sinulit si Major Nicholas Kelly ng Australian Army na maganda yung title niya, yung hybrid warfare. Sa kasalukuyan, ang ginagawa sa atin, hybrid warfare. Hindi naman tayo lumalaban ng we're not fighting even a naval war in the South China Sea. What is being done is that strategically for the Chinese, they have really declared talagang sa kanila yung South China Sea. In spite of the fact na natalo pa sila dyan sa International Arbitral Court, wala yan eh. Sa kanila, talagang it's a lake. And what they're doing is that they are not, they started with hybrid warfare. That means it's a iba-iba yan. May economic prong yan, merong diplomatic, merong unti-unti they took over, they started by putting up yung sabi nila silungan ng mga fishermen nila, etc. And then permanent structures, and then they now have practically unsinkable aircraft carriers in the South China Sea, and they have actually been able to do it in a creeping fashion, without the use of obvious and blatant military force. So for us, it is very important that we counter this hybrid Chinese warfare threat in a manner that matches the threat. Kung ang utak natin lagi is bases for us to be able to we're violating a very basic dictum in warfare. Do not prepare to fight the last war. Iba na ang labanan ngayon eh. Pag sinabing hybrid na ngayon yan, kasama rin yan ng cyber warfare, kasama dyan yung actual application. They're using the Coast Guard kuno without the gray ships of the Navy to be able to avoid, they push and they push until to the point wherein there is a shooting war, but they relax and they stop when somebody saber rattles and causes some trouble for them, and then they will proceed later on. So mahaba ang plano niyan eh. Dapat aralin natin, pangmahabaan din ang plano natin. Tama yung ginagawa rin naman ng ating gobyerno sa kasalukuyan. Meron mga bagay-bagay, kick the sins of the Americans once in a while, etc. But and balance this thing. It's a balance. But that fulcrum has to move. That fulcrum should not move from one extreme to the other, or else we are the ones who are going to be put in a precarious position.
Okay, very good, very well. But if there's one thing you proved doon sa inyong paninindigan, yung Magnificent 12, hindi kayo istampad ng presidente. Because Tita Cory was calling on, sige na, wag nyo na munang galawin yan. And you acted independently.
Well, actually, nasa saligang batas naman natin eh. Nakalagay naman dyan. While it is true, and tama si Presidente Duterte, siya ang architect, the president, the executive branch, siya ang architect ng foreign policy. Sa totoo lang, merong mabigat na role ang Senado, that all international agreements and treaties have to be ratified to be able to be implemented, and they are ratified with 2/3 vote. And the reason why the basis agreement was rejected is that it did not receive 2/3 vote.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maliwanag. Pero Dr. Cabalza, you had a chance to mingle with Chinese and American officials and intellectuals. How different are their views on the South China Sea and the Philippines?
That's an interesting question, Camelo. Way back in 2011, when I studied in Beijing, there was already a debate discussion in our class. Kasi ang mga klase ko, mga defense attaches worldwide, the real ownership of the South China Sea. That was the title. And ang guest lecturer namin, yung chief ng, yung parang FOIT ng Navy nila. And really, they are very persistent with their narrative that historically speaking, of course, they own the entire South China Sea. Of course, namin ang nangyari since 2011 to 2016, and we won the arbitration case. And definitely their narrative on the 9-dash line, originally 11-13 dash line, nag-iba na rin, And of course, there are other narratives there. But tama doon sa kwento nga ni Ka-Orly kanina na about the operational tactics ng mga ng plan ng People's Liberation Army Navy, nag-iba rin. because really at that time they are very focused and they have a long-term plan, and they really would want to acquire and reacquire their territories because they have this plan of a national rejuvenation. We know for a fact that the West embarrassed them, no, yung sa kanilang history, no, and that they want to reclaim all those territories, particularly of course no Taiwan, and nakuha naman na nila ang Hong Kong, Macau, and of course their claims on the South China Sea. But definitely this will also solidify their claims that they magiging malakas silang bansa. Now on the other hand, iba naman ang naratibo ng mga Amerikano nung nandun ako nag-aral ako doon sa bansa nila. And of course, no, they are more concerned with their strategies, grand strategies. And of course, we know for a fact that they have this pivot to Asia, and then now they have the Indo-Pacific strategy. Mas maano sila sa strategies in thinking, no? And of course, yung freedom of navigation operations, yung FONOPs nila. But I just observed, comparing the two powers, that sometimes China thinks this way but does differently. Iba yung kanilang sinasabi pero iba rin yung mga ginagawa nila. On the other hand, si US naman, very grand yung strategies niya pero it's not enough. Medyo kulang sila sa action. No, maybe because of some domestic issues also, and of course on how they will execute and balance the relations with China, because they have symbiotic relationship with China, because definitely for economic reasons they need China also, and of course both countries don't want to spark or start any war so far, because it's really expensive to wage war as of the moment. No, that's what we know. But basically, they also saw how the Philippines transition from a small state actor to becoming a middle power. Why? Because it has attracted these two powers. Nagulat sila, bakit lumakas ang loob ng Pilipinas? Well, because we've seen a lot of insecurities in our maritime domains. No, nangyari yan, of course, noong 1995 mischief wave. Nagkaroon tayo ng mga karaoke diplomacy pero hindi naging effective. And then meron tayong mga raming incidents na ginawa ng mga Chinese militia. Then, of course, yung mga how we did hedging and accommodation of diplomacy between these two powers, medyo nag-iba rin yung ating naging actions towards these two powers. And now, all of a sudden, sila ngayon yung gumagawa ng paraan on how to get our side. And that is something, because basically, it has never been experienced by the Philippines before na there are two great powers competing for our attention. And they would want that it will redound to their interest. So yun yung nakita nating mga patterns lately. But basically, in terms of how the Philippines will stand on this dilemma, it has to rethink of its national interest. No, dahil ultimately, tayo rin naman yung kailangang mag-redound sa mga policy choices and the options natin when it comes to engaging with these two great powers that are rivals right now.
Okay. I don't know, pero binanggit mo, Dr. Cabauza, yung iba yung sinasabi sa ginagawa. Secretary Ollie, nakita niyo ba yung pagkakaroon ng mga dove at hawks in China?
Yes.
Ito yung mga peaceniks at yung mga talagang
I remember one. Thank you for that, Sir. No, natatandaan ko, I have a PLA classmates. Ang sabi niya, why are you so much engaged, or you have so much attachment with the US? Sabi niya, we are neighbors. Chinese are like vases. Sabi niya, very beautiful pero very fragile. Samantala yung kaibigan nyo ngayon are sweet talkers. Ganyan ang kanilang narrative. No? That's how it's a part of conditioning the minds. Of course, so you have to also analyze what they're saying. No? And sometimes, really, if you try to analyze what they're saying also, pwedeng, of course, no, they have maybe they sounded in good faith, but at the same time, may double meaning yung mga sinasabi nila. But definitely, no, the reason why I told that sometimes they think differently and acting on different side, Kasi tingnan mo po yung kanilang policy. They always think that they belong to a harmonious country and they have to engage harmoniously with their neighbors. But at the same time, we see some belligerence in the region, animosity and disorder. And we've seen how they operationalize their strategies towards us. One, it was really planned, well planned, that they would secure the South China Sea by hook or by crook. That's why they tried to militarize it. Na alam natin naging dominant sila, and the US couldn't do something even if they insisted for the FONOPs. And China was very successful in transforming the fake islands or in the South China Sea. And now, of course, no, nakita na natin yung mga pwede nilang gawin doon, no. And that's what I'm saying, na iba yung sinasabi sa ginagawa nila. Remember in Scarborough Shoal, that is a classic example. There was a negotiation with the Philippines and China at that time to live together the Scarborough Shoal. Pero they did a lot of deception there, no? The art of war. Our contingent left the Scarborough Shoal, pero hindi sila umalis. Sabi nila may bagyo, kaya hindi sila nakaalis. And now they are in control of South China, of the Scarborough Shoal. So you see the kind of of negotiation and their statements and their actions, no? Magkaiba yung minsan sinasabi nila sa nakikita natin and their sincerity with our negotiations with us. Kaya minsan tayo naman we do a lot of peaceful negotiations na lang kasi naunahan tayo eh. So I think that is a good example of sometimes both parties should be sincere. You should have mutual trust when you negotiate, no? So yun yung nakikita ko doon.
Maganda yan. Your reactions, Senator Orly?
Alam mo, nung araw, talagang yan ang panaginip ng mundo eh. Na ang pagtaas ng China would be peaceful rise of power. Parang Pollyannish, talagang naive ng konti yun. Dahil sa nakita natin, talaga sa totoo lang, it was not that it appears to be peaceful in terms of words, etc. But actually, they have really been flexing their muscles. And this peaceful rise has to be sought. Nowadays, we are seeing, nakikita rin naman ito, napakalaki naman. Sa anumang bansa, meron talagang mga extremists. Merong war, may hawks, may doves, etc. Pero nakikita rin natin, maliwanag naman ang strategiya ng China. So, it has become a main threat to us now in this country. Pag binasa natin yung decision ng arbitral court, talagang maliwanag naman na talagang yung claim nila walang basihan. At napakaganda presentation ni Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio dito eh. Pinapakita niya, nasa YouTube pa yan, yung pinapakita niya yung may iwan sa atin kung talagang wala tayong gagawin. So we have to protect it. Is in our interest. We have to be to protect our territorial integrity, and it's the job of the armed forces of the Philippines to be able to do that. But it doesn't mean it's a matter of going to war. Talagang false dichotomy yun eh. Mali naman yung sasabihin natin, it is a choice between surrender and war. Hindi ganun yun eh. Ang spectrum nun na napakalawak eh. Merong pacific means of settlement of disputes, merong threats, etc., containment, deterrence. There are many other mechanisms. Kaya ang importanteng mensahe, hindi siya choice between war and peace. Sa totoo lang, to be able to have peace, you have to prepare for war. But even the way we prepare has not taken into consideration that strategic formula, that strategic problems that we face. Even the modernization that we are trying to do is not in lockstep with the changes. Dahil hindi naman tayo inaaway ng gera lahat yan eh. Cyber warfare is an area na napakalaki ng pagkukulang natin. Pero hindi natin nabibigyan pa ng yung kinakailangang mga resources. It is also very important for us to be able to reorganize our capabilities and find out and focus on the naval and force and air force assets and to be able to, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have the biggest fighter planes. Look at what China has been doing. From the pages of Mao Zedong's People's War, militia ang ginagamit nila. And tayo hindi natin ma-mirror yun eh. Noon pa man eh, nakikita na namin, sinasabi na namin, ay dahil nakukuha na, nahuli natin in the 1990, 1998, 99, etc. Pag nakakuha kami ng mga fishermen ng mga ano, walang matandang-matanda, walang batang-bata. At makikita mo naman, meron silang radyo, meron silang ano. So their militia force, they have the largest militia now in ano. Tayo, we swing from one end of the pendulum to the other, unfortunately. Timplahan yan eh. Even in negotiations, you squeeze, and then you let go, you push, and then when, ano, yun ang ginagawa sa atin, ganun din dapat ang ginagawa natin sa kanila.
How do we come up with a strategic foreign policy where we can deal with all these threats, if you may? From cyber warfare to actual warfare. Because I recall Vice Admiral Jovi Bacordo in our forum with FOCAP once said, you don't expect us to fire first. Hindi kami gagalaw na ganun. Pero pag may nagpaputok na iba dyan, that will be another issue. Because the bar of public opinion will be on our side.
Ang napaka-importante, pag-aralan natin kung ano yung threat sa atin. Pag nag-agree tayo, tapos yan, dapat yan hindi military lamang eh. Iba yung military strategy. Talagang importante yan. But that is under a defense, a national defense strategy. And that national defense strategy has to take into consideration and to listen to all sectors for us to be able to craft something. Because this is where you really need a whole of government approach. Ngayon, nakikita natin, ginagamit yung whole of government approach dun sa natitirang threat ng communist, etc. Meron silang LCAC, etc. Sinasabi, kinakailangan, hindi malulutas ng militar. And that's the dictum here. The same is true with this particular threat in the South China Sea. It cannot be a military threat alone. Hindi, pag puro military ang magiging approach natin dito, walang mangyayari sa atin. Talagang hindi tayo makakascore dito. Pero pag gitgitan, iba-ibang mga klase mga laban yan eh. Kaya there are many other things that are a component that would mean even our doctrines, our war material, our organization, napakaraming dapat baguhin sa armed forces of the Philippines because it's the biggest component, but it's not the only component in facing the threat of China.
Well, I have to ask you this, Senator Mercado, Secretary Mercado, because we still have that revolving door policy within the Philippine National Police and the Armed Forces of the Philippines. What measures could be formulated if you have a revolving door policy where chiefs of staff just sit for a couple of months?
Okay, yan talaga napakalaking problema. Alam mo ba yung problema niyan eh, 70s pa, 80s, pinag-uusapan na talagang hindi malutas-lutas. Akala ko nalutas na nung panahon ni Pinoy because there was a bill. It was already, but it was vetoed by him. If we cannot gather nahawa na ngayon pati PNP. Yung mga nag-chief of staff. Well, that's only one. That's part. Pero napaka-importante yan. Magkaroon ka ng continuity. Kasi ang napakalaking problema ng pamamahala sa Pilipinas is continuity. We do not build on what was done previously and build institutions. Kaya it's all personal eh. Panahon ko ito. Pagkatapos ng term ko, hindi, wala na ako rito. Bahala na kayo sa susunod.
Yun ang problema.
Continuity.
Yeah. Chester?
Yes, sir. Alam mo, in 2018, may lumabas na po na NSS, yung National Security Strategy natin. Of course, ang naging problem dito, every administration has its own NSS, National Security Strategy. Of course, mas pronounced ngayon. But looking at the outline of our NSS right now under this current regime, lumalabas na ang alliance pa rin natin with the United States remains primary, no? And of course, we are also they use the term diversifying our relations with other countries, including China and Russia and some other major powers. But the point is, tama yung sinasabi ni Ka-Orly doon, na yun din yung pinupoint out ko doon sa dissertation ko noon, na walang institutionalization yung mga policies natin. Dahil 6 years lang ang lifespan ng mga policies natin. Although we're not saying na dapat palit na dapat hindi na siya palitan because of insecurity. When we talk about security, meron tayong konsepto ng VUCA dyan: volatile, uncertain, changeable, ambiguous, and disruptive. Pabago-bago yan kasi hindi natin ma-predict minsan yung attitudes and thinking ng mga leaders and nations, no, definitely. But you have a core interest na dapat naka-stipulate doon sa national security strategy mo, regardless of who the leader is. Kahit magbago man ang liderato natin, kung alam natin yung core values and core interests natin, hindi magbabago yan. Ngayon, i-translate natin with our discussions right now with our treaties, defense treaties with the United States. Mukhang ang tagal na ng mga treaties natin sa kanila. Since 1951 up to now, nagbago yung geostrategic environment. And definitely, along that decades, nag-iba rin yung mga major powers. In the past, you have, the Japan was a threat way back at that time. Now, it's China. And what remains unchangeable is the United States is still the superpower, and we have these defense treaties with them. And in those treaties, ang daming nangyari domestically and with our bilateral relationships with them. Unang-una, ang daming mga sabi nila masyadong pro-US dahil it caters only to the immunity of the officers and military personnel of the US, lalo na pag may mga criminal charges sila towards Filipinos, and Filipinos become second class because of the asymmetrical conditions given in those treaties. No? And it's not perfect. Those treaties are all not perfect. At even if we will engage later on with who will become the superpower in the future, definitely there will be imperfections with those treaties kasi kinakapan natin pa kung anong pwede mangyari. But ang gusto natin puntuhin dito, we should learn from our mistakes. We should learn from the past, from history. Saan nagkulang yung mga partido? Saan nagkulang yung mga treaty parties natin? Ano yung mga kakulangan in terms of the provisions that should be stipulated in those treaties? And it should adapt to the changing times.
Yeah, very good. Senator Orly, you will agree with me that you cannot just say, wala nang VFA dahil kinansilan nyo yung passport ng kapgo ko o ng kaibigan ko. Hindi ganun, ano? That should not be the case.
Ang talagang napaka-importante is that ano ba ang national interest natin? Pag well-defined ang ating national interest, may mga ganyan mga insidente kung saan tayo napipika, etc. Meron ano yan, nangyayari yan. Pero we must have the larger picture. But dapat yan, pati marerevise natin pati doktrina natin, how we do things. Tapos kailangan maliwanag na maliwanag yung external defense strategy natin. And if, for example, it requires, we cannot really, under our circumstances, defend our interests in South China Sea. What is the alternative? Ano pa ang kailangan natin? You need allies. Dapat may sandigan ka, may kakampi ka. Dapat hindi natin kaya. Kahit nasa international law, kinakailangan ma-whip up natin ang international public opinion on our side. So, maraming mga bagay na we should be doing all at the same time. It's not one thing alone. So, I think the other thing is to come up with a credible organization. We have to reorganize our armed forces in such a manner na talagang importante ang Navy at saka Air Force natin. Hindi yung standing army. Standing army was World War II. It's panahon pa ng Unfortunately, we still have lingering problems like the problem with the CPP, NPA, etc. Noong una, nilagay na sa pulis yan, binalik na naman sa militar, etc. You know, kung pati yung mga bagay na yun, urong-sulong tayo, we cannot stay the course. You lose in a struggle with a country like China that has a very, very long view of things. What are the Chinese saying? They keep on repeating pa ulit-ulit eh. Ano mga core interest nila? Amin ang Tibet, sabi ng China. Amin ang Taiwan. At amin din ang South China Sea. Ibig sabihin yan, from their point of view, pamatagal, kano man magsasasayaw tayo, we can saber rattle what we want, they will always go back to their core interest. That doesn't mean we give up. We have to define our national interests, our core interests. And that should be our mantra. And that, to me, is critical. Naalala ko, lagi kong kinukwento sa mga estudyante ko. 1967, nung una ako magpunta sa China, Cultural Revolution. Nung kumakanta yung mga bata doon sa Xi'an na nandun ako, guest ako, sabi ko doon sa interpreter, ano yung kinakanta ng mga bata, mga 10 years old, yung mga masaya-masaya talaga what's the name of the song? The title of that song is a popular song nowadays. What's that? We Will Liberate Taiwan. Yun ang kinakanta ng mga bata. 1967, ha?
Really?
In the height of the Cultural Revolution. That shows you that even in the educational system, they have imbued certain thinking. Tayo, natatakot pa tayong magsalita kahit sa ating pag-aaral sa mga estudyante. Dapat tinuturo na natin sa kanila yung victory natin sa kung ano talaga yung bakit importante ang West Philippine Sea sa atin. And the very basic fact that we are a maritime country and we must defend our maritime resources because that is our existence that is being threatened.
Okay, but looking at our internal conditions today, how serious is the insurgency problem? Because it's been the focus. In fact, binubuhusan ng billion-billion people. How serious is the insurgency?
No, actually, the question to be asked is, why is it that we have not been able to really end the insurgency? Simple lang naman ang sagot niyan eh. Extreme poverty. It's all about poverty. And tama yung approach ngayon ni Presidente Duterte. Buwasan mo na But if it is well spent, no? It addresses and builds institutions in marginalized barangays that have been the home of the CPP-NPA. We will be able to win the war. There is no military solution to that problem. Yeah. The military is part of it. The military solution is part of it. But even nung araw yung ang tactic dyan clear, hold, consolidate, develop. Pagdating sa consolidate at saka develop, doon bumabagsak. Kaya balik na naman yung
Nagkakaroon ng misspelling dahil yung develop nagiging envelope.
Well, putting money... pero throwing money at the problem is fine if it gets to the poor.
Okay. Okay. I got your point. Pero is it just coincidental that insurgency exists in areas where people are poor and where political dynasties lord over?
Yan. Maliwanag na maliwanag yan. Gumawa ka lang ng mapa. Kunin mo yung mapa ng lahat ng affected barangay sa CPP-NPA. Tapos gumawa ka ng separate plastic. Kung ano yung mapa ng mga barangay sa pinakamahihirap. Yung walang doktor, walang eskwela, walang yung mga lumads, doon lalabas yan. Makikita mo, doon ang CPP-NPA.
Okay. Dr. Cabalza, yung ibang bansa walang insurgency tulad nung sa atin. Na marami na ako narinig na defense chief at chief of staff at PNP Director General saying, we will lick insurgency. I've heard that time and again, over and over again.
Yes, I do agree with some of the points of Orly, no? So all boils down to poverty issues kasi eh. Yun yung long term. But more than that, it's about innovative governance. Dapat hindi rin maging kapante yung mga namumuno sa atin na they can only do these things. They can think out of the box. Kasi sometimes in our culture, magaling tayo mag-identify ng problema natin. We're very good at that. Pero when it comes to innovation, or to implementation, hirap tayo. And sometimes, there are vested interests also. I will also would want to call out the attention of our elites. Kasi kasalanan din ng mga elites natin. They've been selfish. All through our history, we've seen that sila rin pa rin yung mga elitista simula nung panahon ng Kastila hanggang ngayon. Mayroon mang dumagdag, konti lang. So the point is, when you have innovative policies with educated and middle class people, ang mangyayari niyan, magiging productive, proactive ang mga Pilipino, and definitely they will help the government. Kasi look at what Malaysia did. They had also insurgency issues in the past. Pero ginawan ng gobyerno nila na dapat walang maging mahirap sa kanila, o kung meron man, konti lang. And that started on how Malaysia was able to build itself. No, they think that they are developed nation in Southeast Asia. That's their thinking. No, pero of course in the HDI hindi naman ganun ka-develop pa. But the point is they were able to overcome that problem in terms of insurgency. That also leads to the issue of for a fact na nagiging red tagging yung mga issues natin ngayon in universities and kadugtong yan eh. We need progressive minds. At dapat din yung nasa poder lalo na doon sa mga institusyon na masyadong sarado yung doktrina nila, kailangan din mabuksan yung kanilang pag-iisip at lumawak yung kanilang training. Because basically it's a whole of nation approach there. But you should also help all institutions and all people, parang ecosystem yan eh. Hindi pa pwedeng isa lang yung kailangan mong buuin. Kailangan everybody should put action into it, no. Maging alert lahat. But it all boils down to innovative thinking, no. Kagaya rin ng nangyayari dito sa South China Sea. Ang lacking sa atin, wala tayong maritime security governance. I'm writing right now a paper comparing all the Coast Guard enforcement agencies in Southeast Asia, including China. At napansin ko, lahat naman sila nanggaling sa armed forces originally. Yung iba tapos and then they were they became independent and became under the Ministry of or the Department of Transportation. But they still have that police power. Pero ang daming batas na nagsanga-sanga, and sometimes they are not harmonized. Kaya minsan yung identity nila when it comes to police powers, nakakatakot, especially during conflicts. And in which case, hindi nare-resolve, no? Yun yung mga nakikita natin mga issues on that. Nakamute kayo, sir.
Yeah. I would like to open the floor to our colleagues from the media, but let me ask you, Senator Ollie and Dr. Cabalza, how would you compare the Philippines with that of Vietnam or Indonesia na meron ding mga problema sa South China Sea? Sino kaya unang taker? Ka-Orly, ka muna.
Well, actually, nakikita natin talagang modelo rin ng Vietnam. Pero pag inisip mo, Vietnam, ang karanasan nila sa kasaysayan, pag binasa natin ang kasaysayan, ang karanasan nila sa gera, napakahaba. No, they fought the Chinese, they pushed them back, they fought the French, they beat the French, and they beat the Americans. So, dito na nakikita natin na mabigat yung kanilang nationalismo, and yet, no, they've been able to hold what they can in the Paracels in the South China Sea.
Yeah.
Partly because of the fact na talagang nagbabago yung kanilang military organization eh. Isa sa mga problema natin is that hindi natin mabago we have not made the military force dynamic. We are still personnel intensive. Ang budget ng military natin talaga napakalaki, personnel. Kasama na rin diyan yung pension
Retirement.
or retirement,
Retirement.
etc. Okay. It looks like it's big, but in actual pagdating sa mga pangangailangan so you have to reorganize. There should be a organizational restructuring to achieve it in such a manner that it is more technologically based force. Because our neighbors have been able to do it. This means it includes civilian ranks and technologically trained personnel na nakikita natin na magaling pa sa cyber operations at saka how to be able to operate other in the face of other threats, no?
Okay.
Sa akin napaka-importante niyan eh. Then the priorities of the funding of our equipment should come in, and then strengthen our relationships. If for example you're faced by a big bully in the neighborhood, well, one of the things that you can do is start exercising and learn martial arts. But in the meantime, you're still working your skills up. Kung merong pinsan kang malaki rin na samahan mo nga ako rito, ginugulo ako rin meron kang kakamping malaki rin. So dapat ganun din ang pag-iisip natin eh. We're not going to go it alone. And nowadays, talagang warfare can be fought without firing a shot. And that means you can turn off, you can control an area. Yun ang aralin natin. How will we be able to, atin yun eh. Meron tayong papeles, meron tayong desisyon. But lagi tayong, huwag tayong pumasok dyan, mapapaaway tayo. Pag ganyan dahil, you abdicate. Pag nag-abdicate ka, papasok to talagang mas mahihirapan ka. Dapat yan eh, every inch we will be there, and kung kinakailangan saber rattling, kung kinakailangan, nung araw naalala mo nung panahon namin, pagdating na nung panahon namin, pag naglalagay na mohon na Chinese doon ang instruction na pasabugin na, etc. Yun ang ginagawa natin. Magpaprotesta sila, protesta rin tayo. Bakit kayo naglalagay ng muhon diyan?
Okay.
Yung mga bagay-bagay na pwede. Maliit na mga bagay-bagay, pero they affect our thinking. Let us not give up. That is the point.
Okay. Dr. Cabalza?
Ang pinagkaiba ng Indonesia and Vietnam sa Pilipinas, they invested so much in their Navy and Coast Guard. Kasi iniisip nila, they are maritime countries. The Philippines is not yet a maritime country. We are just an archipelagic country. Kasi hindi tayo magkaiba po yun, yung archipelagic country sa maritime country. Kasi kung maritime power ka, maritime country, you should become a maritime power na kaya mong depensahan lahat ng maritime domains mo. Hindi nagawa ng Pilipinas yan. We failed with that. And it's only now that we are investing on our Navy Air Force. In which case, yun dapat. Kasi ang naging problema natin, we depended so much with major powers. No?
Like the United States.
US, no? Kasi pinangakuan din tayo, we cannot deny the fact na pinangakuan din tayo na kayo nang bahala sa internal nyo, kami bahala sa external. And with that kind of thinking, na-trap tayo in that situation. But for Indonesia and Vietnam, it was the reverse. They didn't depend to major powers because they only think of their own national security.
Yeah.
Naisip na nila kung anong pwedeng mangyari sa kanila. And they saw these threats coming in. And they were able to successfully protect their nation. No? At nakita natin yan, pinapasabog nga ng Indonesia pag may mga Chinese fishing vessels na pupunta sa kanila.
Malupit yung minister nila ron ng fisheries.
Yes po.
Pasabog.
Yes. At dito, hindi natin magawa yan because of some diplomatic repercussions. Kapag ginawa yan, it will cause conflict and war, possible shooting wars. No? Kasi nga, naipit na tayo sa sitwasyon. But if we can turn back time at talagang
Which we cannot do anyway.
we cannot do anyway, we will just rely with alliance. Kaya nga may mga defense treaties tayo na ang Indonesia at Vietnam wala naman in the first place. Wala naman silang defense treaties with the United States eh. Pero look at what they're doing. They're so powerful in the region and they can defend themselves. At yun ang nakakahanga sa kanila po.
Okay. Malupit pala. Malayo pagkakaba. Si Karen Lema of Reuters may have some questions. Karen, please go ahead with your questions. Karen, you're there?
Hi,
Go ahead.
hello. Hi.
Yeah. Asan yung video mo?
It's not working.
Video.
Oh, it's not
Looking
working. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, sir. Thank you. Thank you for this forum. Appreciate it.
It's your idea.
Yeah, just jumping off from the recent comments that the president made. That's really something that I think other people wanted to understand. You heard the president say that he wanted the United States to pay if they want to keep the visiting forces agreement. I know Mr. Chester already mentioned that this is not something new because the Aquino administration even demanded similar payments. But what I'm trying to understand is, what do you make of that statement? And in particular, sir, insofar as the VFA agreement is concerned, can that be done? And what is it that we can ask payment for? I think for the basis it's very clear since they'll be paying rentals. But for the VFA, for me, it's not really clear. So it's something that I want to understand. The president, I think, made follow-up comments in saying that they wanted armament and arms to make us at least on equal footing with whoever country we are at war with. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Your comments, please.
Well, yung proseso naman ng assistance, nire-negotiate yan at the Pentagon level, tapos yan pumapasok. Para sa atin din yan, pumapasok sa budget yan, sa House of Representatives ng Amerika at saka ng Senado. So mayroong proseso yan. Talagang hindi naman maaaring ganun sabihin na this passes through a particular process like what we have here. But I think the president has articulated certain things that point to the frictions that we have in our sometimes love-hate relationship with the Americans. Sa totoo lang, it's the only game in town for us in terms of the South China Sea. Wala na tayong masasandalan kung hindi yan for the moment, no? Until we're able to yung sinasabi ni Chester na ginawa ng Indonesia at saka ng Vietnam to strengthen their navy, etc. That will take time. Sabi ko nga, learning martial arts to face the bully, you'll have to exercise and it will take time. But the point here is that it is very critical that we strengthen and we do not lose the positive thing is that even during Trump's time and now, it appears there has been some consistency. That means that the Americans feel that it's not in their interest to relinquish their influence as a Pacific power. Kasi yun ang question ng araw talagang nung dumaan si Trump, the question in our minds is simple. America first. Ang ibig sabihin nito, atras ito. Kinagagalitan na niya yung NATO Sabi niya, wala, bayad kayo. Hindi ako you're not spending enough for, it's us alone, etc. Tayo malayo pa. Could you imagine? But if we study a little bit more, we can find out that talagang it is in the interest of the American economy and economic survival and position in the world for them to be a Pacific power. So this, to us, is part of it. So that means that if we can get them to also continue this patrols, this freedom of navigation, it can, for the time being, be a deterrent for the continued militarization of what assets the Chinese have done. Otherwise, it will grow so big that ni tayo, ni isang galunggong, wala tayong mahuhuli dyan sa lugar na yan dahil sa they insist it is a Chinese lake.
Yeah. Doctor?
Well, our president right now saw a leverage, on his advantage, because technically there was a precedence in that price before. You have former President Aquino asking for a payment before, and although it wasn't successful, and now he has more confidence in doing that because there was a precedence. And let's look at the case right now. There are two superpowers courting the Philippines. If he couldn't ask that favor from the US, then he could turn to China. And secondly, it will become a bargaining chip for the Philippines. And secondly, the US is saying that we've been supporting you, giving you aid since 2006 to 2020. We gave you $700 million already. But that is an aid. That is a support, your help. We are asking for a payment. But it should not be a double standard. If we will ask a payment from the US for their security activities in our country and in the region, then we should also ask the same thing from China. China destroying our maritime resources. It should not be a double standard. It's about transaction. It's kung ang gusto ng gobyerno natin ngayon is about real business in engaging with our partners and alliances, then it should be objective, and it should not have any biases towards these powers, no. And thirdly, the reason why I said na it has become a leverage for the Philippines now, because the Philippines and the president knows that the Philippines has geostrategic importance. One is we are at the center of this South China Sea conundrum. Secondly, we have also domestic issues on terrorism, because they did the U.S. Embassy said na let's not compare the Philippines with Pakistan, because the problem in Pakistan is the terrorism issues. But we also have domestic issues on terrorism here. At the same time, we have external issues on the South China Sea. That's why mas malaki yung stake natin, no? We are asking for a price to help. It's not about it's no longer about cash register diplomacy, but it's about pragmatism, because all of us needs economic support right now because of the current pandemic. Wala namang pandemic, hindi naman tayo manghihingi ng presyo ng pera. And also because of the changing security situation and regional architecture in the region. That's why, because basically we negotiated for MDT, for military bases agreement. Why not negotiate for VFA? It should be down to our interest. Bakit tayo mahihiyang humingi ng bayad kung talagang kailangan natin? And we will also support them. That's why we will test our alliance now with the US. And vis-a-vis the true intentions of China with us. Magbayad din kayo sa mga siniran yung mga resources namin.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Teka, yung bayad na yan, dapat transparent.
Definitely. Dapat po. At dapat may concurrence ang Congress dyan. Because the President cannot just act alone. Nung nakipag-negotiate tayo for the MDT and MPA, it was through Congress. And it should be done also this way. Before we ask for payment from the US and China, it must pass through the Congress. And there must be concurrence from the Congress. And the President will only execute it.
Okay. Very well. Karen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you, sir.
All right. Let's try the signal from Chara Sembrano of ABS. Hello.
Hi, yes. Good morning, everybody.
Yes.
I'd like to ask, yes, both Orly and
I can see you.
yes, that is my intention to not show
Okay.
myself. Maybe some other time. Yeah.
Go.
I look so much better in that photo than I do now. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. You see.
All right.
yeah. So I'd like to ask Ka Orly and Chester both. Um, about what are your thoughts about despite all that has happened, President Duterte still appears to be quite well, a lot more sympathetic to China than he is to the US. Do you feel that it is a beneficial position for the Philippines, or is it damaging to the Philippine stance? Because in one hand, it is his sympathy towards China is keeping the U.S. on its toes. It's giving us space to bargain and negotiate and demand with the U.S. Which is a position we haven't seen before. But on the other hand, it does seem a little like sleeping with the enemy. It's cozying up to the the country that is causing the problems in the first place. So, anong tingin nyo dito sa sa posisyon ng presidente?
Alam mo, si Arab, pagpapaumanin mo sa akin, baka magalit ang mga tao sa akin sabihin sexist ako. Pero sa natutunan ko sa politika, napaka-importante na naisip mo, never fall in love. Just go to bed. Dahil lang sa...
Delikado.
Okay. I'm sorry. Sinasabi ko lang to. Largely because of the fact that napaka-importante na sa isip natin. Mga taktika yan sa negosasyon eh. Hindi naman, yan ang mga bagay-bagay na yan. Personal relationship and friendship is important. It sets the tone. But it can only do so much. If it is really contrapuntal, and then it's really at odds with your interests, remember, yung external, your foreign policy is an extension of your domestic policy. Kung ano nangyayari sa iyong bansa, napaka-important. May partikular na mga interest tayo na dapat na talagang pangalagaan. Kaya ang importante dyan, basta well-defined yan, yung taktika na ginagamit ng presidente, etc., we leave that up to him. The fact that he was able to establish very good relations with the president of China is a very it's a laudable fact, because this is diplomacy at the highest levels. The fact that he can, there's rapport between him and President Xi Jinping, that's great. Well, but what I'm trying to say is that alam naman natin yan, talagang may hangganan yan. And what defines everything is not emotion, kundi our national interest. Regardless of how palatable or how nice a person is, that is beside the point. In the end, what does it do to our national interest?
Well, for me, when Duterte came into office, he was a popular leader, just like the former president of the United States, also a populist leader. Both of them are populist leader at the time. And the reason why he tried to go with and also the president of China is a populist leader. So tatlo silang populist leader. Ang reason why he favored much Beijing than Washington, because some of his personal and national interests aligned or got favorable responses from Beijing than from Washington. Kaya medyo nag-alay muna siya kay Beijing. And also because he was trying to test the waters that if we can befriend China, perhaps they won't antagonize us anymore with our claims in the South China Sea. Pero hindi ganun yung nangyari, because China is very consistent with its claims over the South China Sea. And they militarized it, and there were conflicts and of course misunderstandings between these two leaders or the three leaders. And all of a sudden, naipon lahat yung mga galit din niya with the US because of some injustices. Because of course we are a former colony of the United States, and also for his personal tirades against the US, also because they issued a lot of comments over his war on drugs and human rights violations and so on, which he couldn't get that from Beijing. Kaya medyo lumihis siya ng konti sa Washington. But there's a new president right now in the United States, and he's trying. Duterte is still trying on how uh, to engage with Washington right now. Pero mukhang si Beijing kasi nakakuha na ng advantages. May marami na siyang invest in the Philippines, particularly economically speaking. A lot of economic projects, and Beijing supported him in his build programs. We'll see later on how Washington will catch up. Particularly, I think the most crucial thing in the remaining 1.5 years of Duterte will be how to restore the damages on the military defense treatises, particularly on the VFA, the MDT, which we will celebrate its 70th year on August, and also by 2024, where EDCA will of course will initially be terminated. We'll see how the Philippines and the United States will work on that restoration of their building of trust and mutual trust with each other. And I don't know if China, Beijing will get envious of that.
Follow up ko lang. So you believe that it's a good thing to review sabi ni Secretary Roque, not just the VFA but also the MDT and also the EDCA.
Right.
Do you believe it's a healthy thing?
Right. Yes. Kaya nga ang opening statement ko kanina, it's the alpha and omega of defense treaties. Kasi mag-uumpisa sa Mutual Defense Treaty, which will operationalize the VFA, and also it will extend to EDCA because it's an expansion of the VFA. Kasi hinawakan niya na rin yung maritime safety and security, HADR. Now, without all the specifications on the deterrence there, and because of the changing security and environment and architecture in the region, where China is perceived as a threat, then it should be spelled out. We need some clarity in those defense treatises. Otherwise, it is stuck from the past. Parang historical na lang siya, magiging moot and academic. Then we have to revive it in order to respond to the current and changing times. Because yung MDT focused before of the threat way back in 50s, 60s, and 70s. Japan is no longer a threat. And so with other, we don't have Seattle anymore. But today, we have a multilinear and multipolar world. Iba yung nangyayari because great powers are competing right now for that position to become a superpower, and China is a potential candidate for that superpower position to replace the United States. Now, it will also translate on how we will see the future, because gaya nga ng kaninang sinasabi natin, our national security strategy is only until 2022. The next Philippine president will have another national security strategy, and it will also affect our defense treaties with the United States. If VFA will survive this year and so with MDT, then that will also affect what would be the foreign policies of our next president.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Secretary Orly?
Isa sa dapat gawin natin, napaka-importante, is to be able to understand deeply the threat that already exists for us. And that is the threat of this Chinese hybrid warfare na ginagamit sa atin. Sa atin kasi hanggang ngayon ang framing natin ng mga threats is a military threat. The reality is that we are being pilloried on several fronts, and the military portion is only a component of that. So, if we try to understand this hybrid Chinese warfare, then we will be able to come up with a strategy to counter it, so that future activities and threats that come, that emanate from China, whether directly or indirectly related to the South China Sea, will be understood and we can prepare. That means that we have to do things also to be able not only to understand, to counter that. If that is a threat that we have to counter, that means we have to reorganize, modernize. Kasi sa atin, ang thinking natin na modernization, bili lang ng vapor, bili lang ng barel, bili lang ng aeroplano, modern na tayo. Sa totoo lang, hindi yun ang hinahanap natin sa modernization. Dapat yan ang capability natin na de-develop, we have to reorganize it in such a manner that it is not personnel focused alone, but technologically capable. Kaya ayaw magsalita ng reorganization naman. Dahil marami kinakabahan pag sinabi mo sa militar. Sabi, ay, mawawala na kami ng ng mga rango, ng mga posisyon, etc. That it can be studied and undertaken in a way that you can assure them that they will not be out of a job. That there are other things that can be done, and that means also getting us technologically capable. So yung modernization mo dapat threat-based, and it must not be only personnel focused, but it must be technologically focused. Then we can say, nakita mo nangyari sa Amerika? Kahit ng pinakamayamang bansa sila, na-hack yung kanilang eleksyon. Ngayon nagkaroon ng snowstorm sa Texas, bagsak din yung kanilang power. Even water was a problem. So even technologically advanced countries can be undermined in such a manner. So we have to be very careful about it.
Very good. All right, Kiara, okay na? Meron pa? May pahabol pa?
Mamaya na lang, Sir Melo, pagka nakapagtanong na iba.
Okay. All right. Baka may
Thank you.
tanong yung kasama natin si Catherine Cruz of CNN Philippines. Catherine, got some concerns? Please go ahead. Catherine? Wala? Okay. Si John Patrick Conde. John, got some concerns? May feedback kasi yung ating mga nanonood. A retired general said, tama ang sinabi ni Senator Mercado tungkol sa insurgency. Ang problema talaga sa consolidate and develop phase ng campaign na papel ng mga politiko, diyan nagkakaproblema. Katulad ng problema sa Lopez Quezon, nabanggit niya, nung magkaroon na ng consolidation, kailangan yung hotel system. Ang sagot ng mayor, kukonti ang tante dyan, wag na lang. You know,
I can believe that.
hindi ko malaman kung ROI ang gusto ng politiko eh. Return on investment. No? Tapos yung malaking budget sa personnel services, dapat daw magkaroon din ng reassessment dun sa recruitment at deployment ng uniformed forces.
Tama yun, tama yun.
Yung feedback ay mula kay retired General Irene Manawis. Okay. So, i-acknowledge ko lang. Tapos, dun sa isang tanong pa rin, gentlemen, do you think there'll be much changes sa pagpapalit ng administrasyon? Because I do remember, nabanggit ni Agnes Calamard ng naging guest ng FOCAP last January. Nabanggit niya, pag meron dalawang superpower na naglalaban for supremacy in an area like South China Sea, all other issues take the backseat, including human rights. So, parang lumalabas, whether you like it or not, kay Republican, kay Democrat, the policies will remain. You've had a long time, Senator Ollie, dealing and talking with these people, your counterparts from the United States of America. Your thoughts, please.
Well, the focus Ano ba yung tinatanong mo? Yung focus kung ano,
Yung focus, kahit sino maupo sa Amerika, yung pa rin American interests, regardless kay Democrat, kay Republican.
yun ang ano, yun ang tinatawag sa, well, I use the words dominant leitmotif yung bang sa music nga merong hindi nawawalang kumpas, ayun. Yung leitmotif sa musika. Yun ang wala tayo eh. May bubulsok dito ang ideya, etc. Kasi ang sinasabi na nila, yung society natin personalistic eh. Our loyalties are to people, not to institutions, and we're not very good in building institutions. I disagree with that sometimes, or a lot of times, because I believe that the world is changing, and even our people are changing. So I think what is important is to be able to institutionalize. Ngayon, ang problema minsan sa atin, we think we've institutionalized something, some reform, by passing a law. Magaling tayo. Lahat ng mga batas natin, marami tayong mga batas na magaganda eh. Marami tayong mga proyekto, mga programs na magaganda. Unfortunately, there is a world of difference between passing a law and implementing it. Nandun sa implementation ang nagiging problema natin eh. So, we think we solved a problem on there. We signed this already. We have an executive order already. We have etc. But in the ground, it is a totally different thing. Kaya napaka-importante yung supervision, and the executive branch has to be held accountable by But there are no magic things that we can do. I think we have made strides in public administration that are very welcome. There's a lot more to be done. But from the point of view of the military, ang importante talaga to be able to create a condition wherein the interoperability of the effort against the insurgency is really fully linked with the civilian government. Isa sa mga napansin ko sa pagtuturo ng sa CGSC, sa SADAP at saka sa iba pa mga sa Ateneo at sa UP is the fact that we're now beginning to realize napaka-importante para sa mga estudyante natin sa militar to understand how to operate within the bureaucracy, the Philippine bureaucracy, the government bureaucracy. To teach them how to fight is fine. But the fights now that we have are no longer just with the weapons that they train. They can shoot very well, they can bomb accurately, but that may not be enough. How to operate with the mayor, how to see to it that that projects are done, etc., is going to be part of it. Pag sinabi natin, hindi, bana na civil society yan eh. We lose pa. In the end, tumatakbo sa militar eh. Kahit na sa pamamahala, the president has been relying mostly on military generals to be able to implement, because he thinks that, and rightfully so, it's going to be faster, and they follow orders more easily. But then again, that's only part of the game. So I think we should take stock of how we are being able. Do we go to the substance? Substantive ba yung changes na nakikita natin or that we want besides passing a law?
Okay. Yes. Dr. Cabalza?
For me naman po, there should now in which we're trying to do, kasi kasama ko naman si Ka-Orly sa DAP, sa CGSC, NDCP, and now with the PCG. We're trying to humanize the curriculum and of course the trainings of our uniformed men and women. Dati, of course, nandun pa rin naman yung training, operational training nila na war fighting. But ultimately, beyond that, they should also be well-versed and be sensitive when it comes to human rights and also to international laws and treaties of the country. para pag sumabak sila dyan at mayroon tayong negosasyon or may mga violations, they know what to do and what should be done. And they should also advise. Also, syempre, ang alam naman natin dyan, may hierarchy pagdating sa mga uniform personnel natin. But that, pag nagiging strategic na sila and they have the voice to decide, maalala pa rin nila yung mga sinasabi namin ni Ka Orly na isipin niyo yung mga human rights violations also and some of the things that we discussed on the international laws, no? Because ultimately, but the question na tinatanong nyo kanina po, even the American interest, regardless of their political parties, no, will only think of their own. They will not think about human rights issues now.
Okay.
The US should still continue kasi yun naman they should teach what they preach kasi kilala sila, especially now that they have a great competitor through China na hindi masyado tinitingnan itong mga issues na when it comes to human rights and of course international law. They should still become the vanguard of these values because ultimately countries or the international community without values, common ground values, will not survive, and we will only go into war and conflict without having all these this kind of values. No, kailangan pa rin kahit papano ipagpatuloy pa rin nila itong mga sinasabi nila towards them.
Yeah. One brief question for Senator Orly and Dr. Cabalza. Can we do away with GSC in the promotion? It's not general staff course. It's called governor, senator, congressman na nag-i-endorse for promotion. Ka Orly?
Alam mo, when I became secretary, I was the first secretary after a long period. Siguro mga 10 taon din yung puro general, dating general ang nagiging and the last to be Secretary of Defense na civilian was Johnny Ponce Enrile, who 16 years, no? But I became the first in a long time since EDSA. So one of the things I kept saying to the military was that I understand that there are two very important things for the officers, and that is rank and assignment. I will leave that to you. As a politician, yan ang bagay na hindi ko pakikialaman. And the thing I will do is protect you, protect your process. No matter how many problems you have, kahit na sabihin mo meron kayo din mga problema sa promotion, etc. Bahala na kayong Board of Generals, etc. Kayong humusga niyan, etc. Hindi yung mga kaibigan ko, mga politiko, o yung mga pagkakautangan ko ng loob. And if I may blow my own horn, in that particular area, talagang I did not allow any promotion just for the sake of political expediency or indebtedness.
Okay. Chester?
Ideally, the intention of putting our military officers into these courses is for them to think strategically, maging strategic sila. Because we know for a fact na na-expose sila with operations and conflicts, and kailangan din nilang magbasa at maging wais para matignan yung anong totoong nangyayari sa lipunan natin. And of course, as they go higher and get promoted, they will deal with the civilians because of course the government is still composed of civil servants. At kailangan ang katotohanan, kailangan nilang mag-engage sa mga civil servants na matataas ang posisyon. That is the logic behind that. Reality-wise, and trying to be realistic also, yung iba ang hanap nila network. Na kapag nakapasok sila dito, especially for civilian politicians, magiging kaalyado nila, meron silang network with the armed forces. Ibig sabihin naman, yung mga ibang mga armed forces, officers natin, kasi may early retirement sila, 56, kailangan natin maka-network para paglabas natin sa serbisyo, meron tayong posisyon. So,
Okay.
it's a web of life
Symbiotic relations pala.
at nagiging vicious cycle.
Okay.
When in fact, the intention is for them to become strategic.
Okay.
Sana,
Well,
pag may ganitong mga issue para sa bansa natin, alam natin gagawin natin. It's question of personal versus national interest.
Okay.
At sana ang malaking
May,
national interest.
may nagsasabi, baka raw pwedeng ibalik na lang yung Philippine National Police sa aegis ng Armed Forces of the Philippines. While it is true, sabi nung ilan na nationwide in scope, pero police in character. Civilian in character. Pero hindi raw effective. Ano kaya? Binalik din yung military rank sa police eh.
Oh, pero alam mo, may dahilan yan eh. Kasi ang tao, yan, bakit di balik sa pulis, etc. Dati naman galing ang constabulary yan. You know, when you think about it, if you try to understand it, there is a real difference between police work and military. Now, the military's task under the Constitution is to defend the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and defend the people. Okay. Yung police is peace and order. Ano ang pagkakaiba? Maliwanag ang pagkakaiba yan eh. Yung military is mission-oriented. Yung police is service-oriented. Ang police dapat nalubog sa komunidad. Naintindihan nila yung komunidad. Naintindihan nila yung mga behavior ng mga miscreants dyan, yung mga criminal, etc. Samantalang, we don't want to see in the community the military and their armored personnel carriers or tanks or big warfare. Dapat yan nagsasana yan para doon sa mga mas mabibigat na kaaway ng bansa. So, that being the case, these are two different organizations. Kaya yung Constitution ay maliwanag naman sinabi eh. There shall be a national police organization. National in scope, civilian in character. Yung pagbabalik sa maliit na bagay na sabi niya sa akin, okay, they want to be called colonels, etc. But it is bringing back the military mindset. Kaya ang pulis, hindi mo nakikita sa kalsada. Parang military yan, nasa kampo. Pag nagkakaroon sila ng parada, makikita mo lahat ang pulis. Sa ibang bansa, nakalubog ang pulis sa komunidad. Nagpapatrolya. Nakikisa. Kumikilos doon sila sa crime prevention, nasa mga eskwela, nakikipag-usap sa nagbabantay ng mga drugs, etc. Nandun yan eh. Hindi yung tatawagin mo na lang na puro SWAT na lang yan, tapos babarilin na, etc. Hindi ganun eh. Okay. Dapat prevention ng krimen. And the crime prevention, the most important crime prevention is the way your police is organized. Ikaw, Melo, tanongin kita. This week o last week, ilang pulis na nakita mo sa kalsada?
Marami. Marami, nasa kalsada. Meron, may nasa kalsada.
Ako pag nakakita, bihira ako makakita ng pulis. Ewan ko saan ka nagpupunta. Pero ako bihira ako makakita ng pulis. The point there is that one of the biggest crime prevention is police visibility.
Yeah.
Visibility in the areas where Now, you don't want the special forces. You don't want the combatants, the Philippine Scouts or the Philippine Rangers, or the Rangers and the SEALs. You want to see them in the streets.
Okay.
That's the most important. You want to see our police patrolling the area.
Very good. That's nice. I can see policemen in highways. Okay. Nasa highway sila. Okay? Sa EDSA, kuminsan sa Mindanao Avenue. Hindi ko alam kung bakit. Basta, minsan partner sila ng MMDA. Dr. Cabalza, your thoughts?
Okay, sir. Ang dahilan nila para igalang sila at katakutan ng publiko. But it's a sign of weakness and insecurity. Bakit mo palalagyan ng ranggo kung ang kanilang trabaho kailangan lapitan sila ng publiko, ng mga tao at tulungan sila. Meron naman tayong militar na may ranggo na ang kanilang responsibilidad ay protektahan ang bansa natin. But I think it's a psychological conditioning of the minds here, because basically with or without the ranks, if the organization is functioning well and the personnel and the officers are doing it rightly based from their mandates, then it's not a question of their added ranks.
Okay.
Kasi mas lalong matatakot ang tao dahil ang trabaho nila, sila dapat ang tutulong sa atin.
Very good. Okay, may isang tanong dito. Tama raw po kaya si General Esperon in saying that ECLAC has awarded so much support because the Davao Region insurgency problem has been reportedly solved? Is this award proper? What's your take on this?
Well, I'm afraid I'm not too familiar with the Davao experience. I have no personal knowledge. Pero maraming ginawa sa Davao na naging batayan ng success ng naalala mo nung araw talagang ang mga ang kaliwa, ang komunista doon talagang yung Agdaw, yung Nicaragdaw. Di ba? And Davao was able to show how to be able to control this insurgency in that particular area. There are a lot of successes in many areas that Davao can be very proud of, and I think deservedly so. Whether it can be replicated is another question, but I think the models are already there.
Okay. May isa pang pahabol dito kay Zo Vidal. Ang sabi niya kung ito ikang si Xi Jinping had not been elevated as premier, would the geopolitical climate sing different tune sa West Philippine Sea and ASEAN? Premier na kasi siya.
Hindi, palagay ko maliit na bagay yan Pero ang dapat pag pinag-aralan natin ang kasaysayan ng isang bansa, talagang makikita natin ang pagpapalit hindi lang ng personality ng mga namuno, kung hindi nung struktura ng gobyerno. At bago kay Mao, talagang watak-watak ang China. Nagkaroon ng civil war, revolution. Si Chiang Kai-shek versus Mao Zedong. Nanalo si Mao, hindi complete ang kanyang pagkapanalo dahil tumakas sa Taiwan si Chiang Kai-shek. But what happened after that revolution, although it was a disaster economically, etc., was a unification of the of China, and to me, that's one of the most critical things. Now, the rise. Remember, they still claim to be a communist country. Sabi nila, we're a socialist country with Chinese characteristics. No? So, ang joke ko rin socialist country with capitalist characteristics.
All right.
Dahil bagay na bagay sa yung entrepreneurship, bagay na bagay sa Chinese DNA Talagang bumulusok sila and they're manufacturing. And now they're a communist country in name, like many other countries. Pero bumagsak na ang Soviet Union, etc. Nagkawatak-watak na, nagbago na. So it's very important to sometimes we think the changes are dependent only on one man or his title. I doubt very much whether Mao was the premier leader of China, and he never used any title except chairman of the Communist Party. He was never premier, he was never president, etc. And si Muammar Gaddafi was
never promoted himself to general, no? Colonel na lang. Yeah.
Our president enjoys it more to be called mayor.
Okay. All right. Yes, Chester.
Yes, I think we should understand the history of China kasi very dynastic sila, no? And we have a current dynasty right now, which is the Communist Party of China. And of course, starting from Mao to Deng Xiaoping to, of course, Jiang Zemin to Hu Jintao, and you have Xi Jinping. Kahit na-promote yan as premier, they will still carry on with the vision of Mao Zedong. And of course, with the vision of Deng Xiaoping to rejuvenate China and a strong power and a global economy. Nandun pa rin yun. And the mere fact na panahon pa ni Jiang Zemin, nagplano naman dyan si Deng Xiaoping yan sa South China Sea na operationalize ni Jiang Zemin through cardiac diplomacy with us. Pero naging mas matapang lalong pinalakas ni Hu Jintao yung yung PLA kasi halos magkapareho lang yung armed forces capability natin during Jiang Zemin eh. Pero tignan mo nag-leapfrog si China because they funded really their armed forces and they really it matters to them their military modernization program. And because they have grand strategy as a global superpower. Tayo wala naman tayo pong grand strategy. No, regardless of whether or not Xi Jinping will be there, tuloy-tuloy po. And secondly, kung mangyari man yan at Xi Jinping will step down in the soon, parang sa Russia lang yan na magpalit-palit lang ng position yan si Putin at si Medvedev, no? Parang ganyan lang yung gagawin nila. It will be a transition, something like that. And definitely, na-reach na ni Xi Jinping because he wanted to replicate himself as the new Mao Zedong eh. So, ayaw niya talaga, gusto niya stellar din yung kanyang position in the history of China.
Would you also give credit to Zhao Enlai, who designed the foreign policy of China during Mao Zedong's time?
Yes, of course. No, they do collective thinking and actions kasi in China. The party does it, and the party has the upper hand. Taga-execute lang yung mga presidente nila of that. No, if they go beyond that, because they have some personal ambitions also and something to prove to themselves and to the country.
Yeah. Ollie, your thoughts?
May alam mo, naalala ko nung Cultural Revolution 1960s and 70s. Ang isinisigaw ng mga followers ng Mao Zedong yung down with the capitalist roaders. Yung presidente nilang si Liu Shaoqi. At saka sila Deng Xiaoping. They were the ones who were in prison and they suffered. Why? Because Mao was fighting. The Cultural Revolution was focused on preventing those who wanted to introduce capitalist innovations in the economic management in such a manner that it will destroy their purity of Marx, Lenin, and Mao's thought. Pero nakita naman natin yung nangyari. Doon nakita natin kung paano socialism or centrally planned economies don't work. Nung binuksan ng China, talagang nagbago. And when Deng Xiaoping said, to be rich is glorious, to be rich is fine. Talagang, sabi niya, walang problema kung anong klaseng pusa yan, itim o pula, itim o puti. Basta nakakahuli ng go and be rich, etc. And he went to the United States. Deng Xiaoping went to the United States, he even toured it, etc. It changed. People were thinking, oh God, this is a real sea change in terms of the ideology. And we were all hoping for a peaceful rise of China. Ayun pala, kung nagkaroon ka ng poder, talagang mahirap kang pigilin. Kaya tayo, nung nag-iingay na sila talagang nagwawala sa South China Sea, magtampisaw lang sila yung tsunami na dumarating sa Pilipinas. Kaya we have to learn how to live with it and how to cope with it. Not to surrender to it, but to be able to assert ourselves in spite of the obvious imbalance in terms of power.
Okay. What are your thoughts? Can we exist without the Mutual Defense Treaty if we do away with the Visiting Forces Agreement? And let's not enhance the defense cooperation agreement with the United States?
Alam mo sa akin yung Mutual Defense Treaty, yung framework lang yun Talagang ang nandun sa VFA at saka sa EDCA yung implementasyon. With the threat that we face with China, we have no choice. Wala tayong choice. Kung hindi palakasin natin ang ating sarili continuously, pero talagang yung pinsa natin na malaki na poprotekta sa atin sa bully, dahil hindi natin maaasahan kahit anong magandang salita ang ibigay sa atin. Ang China at ang kanilang core values, core interests are at direct odds with the Philippines' core interests.
Okay. Chester?
Well, for me, kaya naging successful kasi si Indonesia and Vietnam without defense treaties with external actors like superpowers. No? Dahil unang-una, yung mga pillars kasi nila in their governance and economy, mga military din kasi. In our Philippines, we have dark ages with our partnership with the military. Kaya nagkaroon ng martial law, ganyan. Kaya naiba yung constitution natin, we have civilian supremacy and so on. Kaya yung mga defense secretaries natin, ginawa nating mga civilian. Although yung mga karamihan pa rin sa kanila, dating former military officers who became civilian because of retirement. But the point here, if we can only trust, and maybe it all boils down pa rin din sa reorganization of our defense organization. Kung talagang mapagkakatiwalaan natin at wala silang any political biases and intentions in the future, then perhaps we can entrust to them that responsibility and mandate. Dahil makikita natin, kinakailangan din ng kapag umalis na tayo sa mga defense treaties natin, particularly with the US, kailangan patunayan ng armed forces na kaya natin. No? Kaya natin tumayo mag-isa, and there should be a concrete plan with that. Kailangan i-implement ng mabuti dahil dito mahinang-mahina ang Pilipinas when it comes to implementation. And the problem is, also, secondly, I'm seeing yung door policy nila. Nagbabago-bago kasi yung mga...
Yung revolving door policy.
Door policy nila. Nagbabago yung mga chief of staff and also yung mga heads of offices doon sa department na mahirap din gawin. Ang ginawa kasi nila sa Indonesia and Vietnam, hindi ganun yung sistema nila. No? Magkaiba yung organization and values nila. Kaya sa ngayon medyo mahihirapan pa tayo. What I will consider is continue with that treaties, with those treaties, pero dapat symmetrical. Pantay tayo. Just like in the VFA, may VFA 1 and 2, may countermeasures din. No? Kung ano ang demands ng Pilipinas at ano ang demands ng other party, may common ground.
Okay. All right. Maganda yun I don't know Ollie, pero may nakikita ka bang gagalaw sa darating na eleksyon sa 2022? May mamanukin kaya ang China at ang Estados Unidos? I still have to hear people dreaming of becoming presidents talk about strategic thinking. So do you think these superpowers will actively get involved in our politics? Ollie?
Ako wala akong sa sirkulasyon kaya ako nag-online ngayon. I was hoping you'd give me some chismis about who is positioning. Wala ako talagang koneksyon ngayon talaga. I've been strictly an academic teaching and one of these days pag we have the time, bigyan mo ako ng ng mga
Pwede tayo
lectures.
magkape dyan. Pwede tayo magkape dyan. Bakit ang hindi? Pero, Chester, bago tayo mag-wind up, no, I will have another question for the good Secretary, Senator. Pero anong tingin mo? Will the US and China play an important role in the coming elections?
Alam mo,
Yeah.
dapat ina-assume na natin nasa kasalukuyang panahon, talagang kasama sa pakikialam sa eleksyon ang gera. Tingnan mo nangyari sa China, sa US with Russia and now they say pati China nakikialam. Yung mga hackers, yung mga kasama na ngayon yan. Pag hindi mo in-assume yan, talagang anong klaseng support? Anong araw talaga mga suporta very open. Ngayon, undermine. Lalabas yan. Kasi kung nasa interest mo, isang bansa ka, ikaw ang China, ikaw ang Russia, nasa interest mo na hindi lumabas yung isang kandidato nito dahil so far, ang track record niya, tayong binabanatan na tayong ginagawa, iniipit, etc. Hindi, pabagsakin mo yan. Kung meron ka makitang parang si Trump na mukhang transactional, makikipag-deal ito. Merong hotel ito merong itinatayong hotel sa Moscow ito, etc. O talaga, ito transactional. Ito, pwede tayong makipagnegosyo rito. Magnenegosyo yan. Meron naman silang kumikilos naman na ginagamit yung social media. Talagang pag binanatan ka ng trolls dyan na talagang mayayari ka, mayayanin ka. Katulad nangyari kay Hillary Clinton. Talagang nayanig siya. Noong una, 12% ang lamang niya sa popular vote, etc. Wala rin. So we have to assume that the world has changed. The military conflicts have changed. And now you cannot separate the military conflicts from the other types of conflicts that do not look like somebody shooting a gun or a mortar. So the point now is we have to prepare for a more comprehensive defense system. That is what the nation needs.
Okay. Dr. Cabalza?
Yes, sir. The mere fact that the US has spelled out that China is a real threat to their national security and a competitor for the US, dapat magising na rin tayo sa katotohanan na magiging parte na ng politika, ekonomiya natin ang China. And also, at the same time, the mere fact that China is investing so much on our trade and economy, particularly on the Build program of the current administration, that's a sign na nandito sila at tutulong sila sa susunod na presidente ng Pilipinas. Ang debate sa 2022, hindi lang tungkol sa West Philippine Sea, kundi tungkol sa ekonomiya ng Pilipinas kung saan nakapasok na po ang mga Chinese investors natin. Because definitely, if you try to look at it, most of the build projects of the government are funded by China and Chinese investors. Let's accept that fact. It's a reality. But where is the US there? Ang madalas na tinitingnan natin with the US is their aid for assistance and also with our treaty with them. Magkaiba ang kung paano ang approach ng dalawang bansa. But ultimately, paulit-ulit naman natin sinasabi na maging balanse tayo at let's look at the national interest of the Philippines. No, we cannot go away with these countries because definitely they will stay.
Okay.
And they will be here for the long time and will engage with us.
Very good. In closing, what do you foresee sa mga susunod na buwan? Si Ka Orly, sabi niya insulated siya. We will have time for some gossip later. Pero definitely, what do you foresee in coming months? Don't you think it will be very exciting until October this year when people dreaming of becoming presidents file their certificates of candidacy? Ka Orly.
Well, sa akin, napakahirap kung ikaw ay nag-aambisyon na ikaw ay mag-ingay, gusto mong presidente sa gitna ng krisis. Unless you have the capacity to be able to help solve these particular problems or join in the solution of the problem. It is the wrong time to announce any interest in presidency. Now is the time to keep your head low and operate in a more sabrosa way so that kasi kahit may mga survey malaki pa ang mga problema natin now the one who can help solve problems, who can be credited for being part of the solution and not part of the problem, I think can emerge a little bit better in the forthcoming elections, which is still way off.
Chester?
Yes, let's wait and see what China and the US will do. Because basically, if the VFA will get terminated and will not get the concurrence of the president, definitely they have alternative options also. And vis-a-vis with China, if China will not become the most dominant actor in the South China Sea and will have a head-to-head parang tug of war with the US, definitely the Philippines will get affected with this. Alalahanin natin na very strategic yung location ng Pilipinas. Hindi tayo pag-aagawan ng dalawang malalakas na bansa kung hindi nila nakikita ang importansya ng bansa natin. And definitely it will matter and it will change. The next president, I would suggest, should be well versed when it comes to national, regional, and global security. Hindi lang dapat yung nakikinig siya sa mga advisors niya o sa mga kundi alam niya kung ano totoo, ano ang talagang problema ng Pilipinas. Because that will help him or her to be more aggressive, advantageous also, and think of the national interest of our country and our people.
Yeah, pang soundbite lang ito, last question. Doon sa nangyari sa Thailand na may mga nagpo-protesta at may nahatulan dahilan sa panglalait sa hari, at doon sa mga nangyayari sa Myanmar, mahalaga pa yung ASEAN, yung pagkakaroon ng konsultasyon at nag-iisang tinig. Is ASEAN still relevant? Because we're thinking of coming up with one community. Considering these internal events, how relevant is ASEAN? Bago tayo magtungo kay Ollie, Chester, ikaw muna.
Well, it is considered as one of the oldest regional organizations in the world. Lagi tayong kinukumpara sa European Union. At kung ano ang ginagawa ng ASEAN, kinukumpara sa European Union. Basically, kung anong ginagawa ng European, tinitingnan din ng ASEAN. The relevance of ASEAN now, it has morphed actually from becoming an economic organization to political security organization. Ngayon, gusto na nilang mag-focus on the socio-cultural. Pero nakikita natin, there is that ASEAN way. Yung kultura must also evolve in the ASEAN in terms, di natin babaguhin yung kultura ng bawat bansa, kundi yung kultura of decision making in the region, because that is another thing, lalo na yung you have to get the concurrence of all nations over what issue. Ang hirap nung gawin. Hindi kinakailangan din also na may mga ibang mechanism kung saan yung mga leaders nito kailangan maging effective also in voicing out their views and also their advocacies, because ultimately yung ASEAN medyo naging static siya lately, no? Kailangan talaga mag-evolve siya, no? Yun ang akin nakita.
Okay, Ollie?
Well, merong malaking oportunidad ang ASEAN na matupad yung kanilang pangarap na magkaroon ng centrality sa pananaw sa ASEAN. Ibig sabihin sa region natin naka-focus doon sa organisasyon. If they are able to resolve some of the problems that are being faced now in Myanmar and also help come and resolve some of the problems that are so deeply rooted in Thailand. Kasi ang kalaban ngayon ito mga kalaban ng demokrasya ang katapat So this is a test. Otherwise, pahina ng pahina Palagay ko, nabanggit ni Chester yung ASEAN Way. Nung naging ambassador ako sa ASEAN, I was the first permanent representative. Isa sa mga disconcerting yan. We don't vote on things. We wait for a consensus to happen where everybody will agree. And then your organization becomes as fast as the slowest. And considering that there are also differences in systems. Mayroong mga demokrasya, mayroong mga military control o dictatorship pa, mayroon naman mga advanced economies na mayayaman na talaga, etc. Talagang iba-iba ang agwat. Kaya ang nangyayari niyan, nagmi-meet, madalas ang mga meeting, ang trade ang medyo bumulusok. Ngayon, pagdating sa seguridad, napakahirap na challenge yan. Dahil lang sa, hindi mo pwedeng i-compare sa EU. Sa EU, meron silang common currency sa isa kanilang region. Dito hindi. Meron pa silang lawmaking body sa Brussels na makes policies for all countries, all 27 countries. Pero sa ASEAN, wala noon. We do not want to give up part of your sovereignty. Because you have to give part of your sovereignty up for the good of the common of the region to be able to act as one. If everybody decides, ayoko nyo, that will infringe on my sovereignty, it will always be a talking shop in terms of the political and security issues and the socio-cultural. Doon sa economic, meron naman mga mabibigat na achievement. Yung pagbababa ng mga taripa at saka yung trade has been successful. But we hope that we'll move forward. I agree with Chester. Yung waiting for everybody to agree, yung ASEAN way na yan, dapat yan ilibing na, itapon na in the dustbin of history. We do not need that now. You need quick action. You need response from the region, considering the new challenges that we face in this century.
Very good. I'd like to thank Ollie Mercado for taking time out to be with us. Si Dr. Chester Cabalza. Sina Attorney Ligon at Attorney Taton, may mga hearing, hindi pa makahulagpos doon sa kanilang mga hukuman. Si Attorney J. Batong Bakal, hindi makatayo doon sa title defense sa National Defense College of the Philippines. But it's a worthwhile discussion with a member of the Magnificent 12 at dating senador ng Republika ng Pilipinas at dating Defense Secretary at si Dr. Chester Cabalza na dating fellow ng People's Liberation Army Academy sa China at nasa Department of Anthropology ng University of the Philippines at nakapag-aral din sa Estados Unidos. Sa mga kapatid natin sa media, sa mga profesional na lumahok at nakinig at nanood, sina Percy Aranas ng Rotary Club, si Mr. Melchor at si Dr. Tan Chiu-Chung ng Chinese General Hospital, and to the rest of the general public from Saudi Arabia to the United States. Maraming salamat po. Until next time, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Ka-Orly, Dr. Chester, thank you very much for your presence.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Ito ang Oragon Internet Television. Maaasahan sa Balance News in Public Affairs, Education, Music and Information gamit ang mga bagong teknolohiya sa pamamahayag. Maaasahan sa katotohanan, kaagapay ng mamamayan sa pagkikipag-ugnayan sa pamahalaan. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now conclude another day of broadcasting activities. You have been watching to this virtual broadcast station, Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting, a commercial non-stop virtual broadcast station through Facebook and YouTube. Registered with business name number 1909782 by the Department of Trade and Industry and authorizing to operate until July 2, 2025. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting is now signing off.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, helas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang bihirang, kuyan ka ng magiting, sa manluluping, di ka pasisigil, sa nagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mo babaw, ay hinagang tulad.